I'd like to call the Monday, October 22nd meeting of the City Commission to order and ask those who wish to join me in standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Clerk, has the roll been taken this evening?
It has. All are present tonight.
Wonderful, thank you. This evening we have a handful of proclamations and presentations, but the first is a proclamation recognizing Chris and Mike Roethlisberger's service to the community. So if you wanted to join me at the podium, and I'll read this proclamation off. So the proclamation reads, whereas it is the collective contributions of citizens and neighbors that define each community, and whereas each community's history is made distinctive and rich because those contributions provide the stories and images for residents to treasure and pass on for years to come, and whereas Chris and Mike Roethlisberger gave freely of their time, talents, and resources for 22 years with no other purpose than to bring enjoyment to residents and visitors of all ages through the celebration of Halloween. And whereas the Haunted Yard on North Lansing Street will always be remembered as a Halloween tradition for families, where visitors were transported into the out-of-this-world Halloween displays where sequels and screams were heard from blocks away. Squeals, not sequels. You know. Whereas the Roethlisbergers' dedication and hard work has not only brought positive attention to our community, but raised over $50,000 for local charities, and whereas the creativity and time spent on this huge undertaking each year by the Roethlisbergers exhibited what great community members they are, and we are thrilled to provide them with recognition they deserve for their generosity. Now, therefore, I, Allison Quast-Lentz, Mayor of the City of Mount Pleasant, Michigan, on behalf of the City Commission and the citizens of Mount Pleasant, do hereby extend sincere appreciation and gratitude to the Roethlisbergers for graciously hosting the Haunted Yard that will forever be a part of the memory that was Halloween in Mount Pleasant. Thank you so much.
Marianne, picture. Oh. Oh, she's going to do a more formal one.
All right. Now we have some new staff here at City Hall and some promoted staff, so I'll let the city manager and other staff.
Yes, actually, we're going to start out with introducing our two new water system operators, and our water supervisor, Jamie Hockmeyer, is going to come up to the podium to introduce them. And Tyler and Jason, if you would come forward at the same time, he'll introduce you to the commission and the public.
Ready for it? Big day. Hello, everybody. I'm very excited to introduce our two new water system operators, Jason DeFeiter and Tyler Hurd. Jason and Tyler are both licensed Michigan Waterworks system operators, and they have years of experience working in drinking water treatment. And as a City of Mount Pleasant water system operator, both of these gentlemen will be operating our water treatment facility, analyzing samples and process control in our water laboratory, completing distribution maintenance and improvements throughout the system, and last but not least, providing excellent customer service to the citizens and customers of Mount Pleasant. So I'd like to welcome them to the city.
And then next, we just did a search for an assistant public works director and promoted Jason Moore from our staff into that position. So Mr. Zhang's going to give some of Jason's background.
Jason started working for the city about 20 years ago in our engineering department, and earlier this month he was named the Assistant Director of Public Works. While in engineering, Jason worked on road, water, and sewer design and worked on capital planning. He's also worked to establish and administer parts of the DPW CIP and operating budgets. At his time with the city, Jason worked with every department in the city, and many of the contractors also work with the city. Jason developed our GIS system into what it is today. He used that technology to improve the planning capabilities and improve our asset management. Jason administered the city's $2 million SAW grant documenting sanitary and stormwater collection infrastructure. And he enabled us to attach related information to the GIS system for better asset management. There are few, if any, city employees who have not used work generated by Jason. In fact, every time this city commission sees a map, chances are it was generated by Jason. When the city experienced the flooding in 2017, Jason was one of the most valuable personnel at the Emergency Operations Center, helping coordinate efforts between agencies and affected municipalities and personnel. Jason has a strong understanding of the public works and the departments that make up that division. It's my honor to introduce Jason Moore to you as the city's Assistant Director of Public Works.
Thank you, gentlemen, for being a part of our city and helping us be a better place to live. So, thank you. Part of the City Commission's request for the city manager last year was to have some more information about what is happening within our departments and what is happening with our city staff. And so we've been doing these departmental presentations every month. So this month we have a presentation from MAC TV Network, who's one of our contracted groups.
Yeah, and this is a little unique because they're not an official department of the city, but the role they play at the city and getting our word out is large. So we thought it was worthwhile to use one of these slots to ask Carrie to give you an overview of what MAC TV does for the city. So with that, I'll turn it over to Carrie.
Thank you. Jeremy is passing out a handout that has a lot of information in it, and I'll kind of hit some of the highlights on that. And I'm always available for questions, and we're just across the street. So my name is Kerry Hamill. I'm the Operations and Administration Director at the MAC TV Network, which is also known as the Mid-Michigan Area Cable Consortium. That's our technical name. The Mid-Michigan Area Cable Consortium was formed as an intergovernmental agreement between communities to operate and maintain public and education and governmental channels on the local cable system, which is now owned and operated by Charter Communications. In the early 90s, and in kind of the formation, it was a variety of different cable companies. And our current members are Mount Pleasant, Union Township, Clare, Harrison, St. Louis, Ithaca, Arcata Township, and Pine River Township. The original and main purpose of the consortium is to give the local communities an option for media. As times have changed, we have been able to grow as well, and we now operate 8 cable channels across Clare, Gratiot, and Isabella counties, as well as making all of the content available online on our website and on our social media outlets. And we also make a lot of our videos available for our communities to put on their own social media or their own websites. The channels that we operate are, we have actually 2 public stations, which are channel 191 and 187. And then in each county, we operate an educational and a governmental channel. So those are actually specific by county. So there's a government channel in Isabella County and an education channel in Isabella County. Same thing in Gratiot, same thing in Clare. The content that goes on those is slightly different. The main funding for the consortium comes from the franchise agreements that the local communities have with Charter, and that's in exchange for Charter using the community's rights of way, putting the cables in the sidewalks and under the sidewalks and up to people's houses. A portion of each of the members' communities' franchise fees are used to fund the Mid-Michigan Area Cable Consortium, and then Charter Communications is also obligated to provide the channel space that we use at no cost. So that's not factored in. That's just something that is made available. There's several FCC laws and rules that mandate that they have to provide some channel space for local community public access stations. So what the city and its residents get are a number of things. And the city directly benefits from its membership in the consortium, because we kind of try to serve as a multimedia and video arm for the community, and the city is directly. So there's a large number of city events and programs that we film and cover, and then we also kind of use a lot of that footage to make promos and to help with those events. So for example, we're always out shooting at Man vs. Mountain and then we can always use that footage that we shot at Man vs. Mountain in 2018 to help promote Man vs. Mountain in 2019, and it usually just kind of keeps rolling from there. Then the city also contracts with MACTV for assistance in operating the city-owned equipment in the chambers, and so that's how these meetings are all able to be produced in what I think is a very high quality. And then our staff also, we stay really current on industry and regulatory issues that are occurring at the state and local levels, and we try to act as a go-between between our communities and charter. Personally, if it was up to charter, they would not be obligated to give franchise fees or to have that channel space, and it's our knowledge and our partnerships with some other, the Alliance for Community Media and other organizations that are similar to ours, that enables us to stay in tune with what's going on in the industry so that we can hopefully maintain that the communications companies, the wireless companies, all honor the rights of way in the way that they should, so they don't try to take advantage of the different communities. Residents, nonprofits, churches, and schools and other organizations take advantage of our resources to a very large degree. MACTV produces a large number of programming, and we also train several volunteers who then can use our equipment and our know-how and our facilities to create their own programming. This all helps create a vibrant variety of productions that are seen on Charter Channels 191 and 187. A detailed list of the staff and volunteer produced programmings are in the handout that you have. We also routinely have interns from the CMU School of Broadcasting and Cinematic Arts, which produce 3 shows. Pleasant Chat, which is like a local variety show. It covers community events, organizations, festivals. Sports Attack, which is a sports show, so a very similar format, but more about high school sports and local sports. And then Art Review, which is a art-centric show, which features any kind of art-centric events that are going on in the area. And we work closely with Outreach for a lot of the content on that show. We also work with the local schools in the Tech Center at Mount Pleasant to have a co-op program, and they produce a show called The Bell, which The Bell is a show all about different school programs. So anything that's going on in a school that's a neat, a class is doing a cool project, or there's a group or an organization that's doing something interesting. Last summer, we assisted city staff in purchasing and installing some new equipment that enabled these meetings and any of your governmental meetings that take place in the city chambers to be live streamed. They're currently live streamed on YouTube, but the equipment that was purchased and installed is able to be used for anything. So if we wanted to switch it to Facebook Live or to any new streaming service that might exist in a year, we'll have the equipment that we can do that, so we can kind of always stay with the times. Unfortunately, Charter does not make any viewerships or rating data available to MACTV or any member communities. That's something that we've requested several times. We are able to track how many programs we produce and who produced them as well. You'll notice that we have a large number of volunteer programs produced, and we also have a large number of Mount Pleasant programs, but we do also cover a big variety for our other member communities as well. That information is all in the handout. Tracking views online is something that we're able to do, so our views on Facebook and YouTube are easy for us to get, and we've found that we've gotten very good views and feedback when we split some of our shows for online usage into shorter segments. So if, say, an episode of Pleasant Chat had 3 segments, we would put them each online on Facebook individually, and then we can share them directly with those groups that might be involved with them, and then they usually can share them. Most times, if anything, we get about 400 to 500 views on Facebook, and if it's some of them where it really gets shared, then it can balloon up to 4,000 or 5,000. And I'm going to show a quick video, which kind of highlights very brief highlights of some of the things that we're doing. And then, if you have any questions, I'll gladly answer them. I think that gives a kind of a very brief overview. I think if you look at the handout, you'll see couldn't obviously fit everything into a 3-minute video, but we enjoy what we do. We cover a lot of different things, and we always are looking for more events and organizations that need help or need things covered, or nonprofits that have events going on that we can help them get information out. Anyone have any questions? Or?
Thank you so much for being here and sharing with us how you help our community.
Awesome. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda this evening? Seeing none, we will have our first opportunity for public input. This evening there are 2 opportunities for public input. The first is now at the beginning of the meeting on anything that is on the agenda. We ask that you leave your comments to 5 minutes and state your name and address. There is also an opportunity at the end of the agenda for any city-related items that are not on the agenda this evening. I'll open the public hearing now. Seeing nobody that has any input on any of the agenda items, I will close this opportunity and ask the city manager to go through the petitions and communications this evening.
This evening, under petitions and communications, we have the following items. We have the report on the pending items. We have the 3rd quarter investment report, the quarterly redevelopment ready communities report, which indicates that we are 98% complete with that in order to be able to do our final review. And then we have a document that provides the customer service feedback summary from the surveys that we did during the months of July through September. And we distributed 1,700 survey cards to individuals that came into any city building and had a face-to-face contact with a staff member. And about 72% of those were returned. We had about 1,200 survey responses that were returned, and we've provided a summary for you of those in the packet, which overall was a fairly positive response, both in the numbers and in the service that they received. And when we get done with petitions and communications, I have a little task for the mayor to do to kind of wrap that up. But we also have the September minutes of the Airport Advisory Board, and then a correspondence from a city resident regarding potential concerns with FCC regulations, and then 3 correspondence received regarding residential snow removal.
Any questions or comments on any of those items? Commissioner Kulik.
I just wanted to say, I've always been an advocate that our staff goes above and beyond, and we should be extremely proud of our staff and the results from this survey. It just verifies that we have some of the best employees in the state right here in Mount Pleasant, Michigan.
I agree. Other comments or questions? Okay, so our fun activity.
Yes, one of the things on the survey card is we indicated to individuals that if they wanted to have their name entered in a drawing for doing the survey, that they needed to give us their name and their phone number. And we had 755 individuals that wanted to be entered into that drawing. So Addie from my office put them in a random order in this list. And I'm going to ask the mayor to pick a number between 1 and 755. And instead of drawing the number out of the hat, she's just going to call it, and then I will let you know who the winner is of our Mount Pleasant gift card.
Oh, I was going to say, they won an all expense paid to a city commission meeting?
That would have been a good one. I didn't think of that. So what's your favorite number between 1 and 755?
We're going to go with 486. I have not looked at the list, just so you know.
Yes, it was a confidential list. So number 486 is someone by the name of Josh. So we have Josh's email address, so we will contact Josh and tell him he is the lucky winner.
Josh is the winner. There you
Josh
go.
is
If
it.
you know Josh, let him know. He won a gift card.
And
Thank
an
you.
all expense paid.
And an all
And an all
expense.
expense paid, yep.
Mindy, I'm sure you'll interview him. Josh. Josh is the winner. All right. Thank you. Consent calendar items. Or is there anything that anyone would like removed from the consent calendar this evening? Commissioner Gillis.
Number 18, please.
All right. Anything else? Seeing that, I will ask the city manager to go through all items on the agenda that have asterisks next to them so that the commission can make one vote on all those items.
The items on the consent calendar include the minutes of the regular and closed meeting from October 8th. We have 2 bids for you this evening. The first bid is for our leaf and snow hauling. It seemed like there should be another word there. As you can see, we look at the bids based on a cost per cubic yard, and as in prior years, the low bid is from a company who is from out of town and charges from port to port. So even though on a per cubic yard basis, they appear to be the low bid, because we have to pay all of that travel time, it doesn't necessarily end up that way. And secondly, the second low bidder had the exact same hourly rate for a per hour rate and an overtime rate. So we're recommending the second low bidder, which is R&T Murphy Trucking, because in essence, we believe that will end up being the low bid when you factor in those 2 things. And the contract would be for $115 per hour. And for the leaf pickup, it's a not to exceed cost of $19,000. And for snow pickup, it's a not to exceed cost of $14,000. The second bid we have for you is for our audit services. We are at the end of a 5-year contract, and so RFPs were sent out and 5 proposals were received. They were reviewed by the audit committee as well as Mary Ann Cornexel and myself. And the audit committee and staff are recommending a 5-year contract with our current audit firm, who is Vardevald and Hefner, for a 5-year cost of $100,650 over those 5 years cumulatively. The contract also includes a provision to have the firm prepare the financial statements for an additional $5,000 each year if we should ever need that service. The next 2 items, excuse me, kind of go hand in hand. They are for the first one is for an easement purchase, and we've previously approved easement purchases for land west of the airport for the Airport Slope Approach Program. For this particular piece of property, we've done the tree clearing. The parcel is owned by Frontier Communications, but we just received the easement documents from Frontier, and they are consistent with the others that were previously approved for this project. So we're recommending you authorize the mayor and the clerk to sign the closing documents to complete the purchase of that easement. And then the next item is the corresponding MDOT resolution, which, since the state and federal government provides 95% of the funding for this project, this grant resolution would authorize the grant agreement to receive that funding, which covers 95% of the cost of the purchase of the easement, as well as all the survey work and the consultant work related to it. The next item is we're recommending that you approve a Learn to Bowl program, which is a new program being offered through our Parks and Recreation Department in partnership with Riverwood Resort. Riverwood contacted us wanting to offer this program, and our role would be primarily to handle the marketing and the registration for the program. So the Parks and Recreation Commission has reviewed the request and recommending we enter into that partnership and set the fees for the program at $120 per participant. So we're recommending you approve the resolution as presented. And then lastly is approval of payrolls and warrants.
I see a motion from Commissioner Kulik, seconded by Commissioner Gillis, to approve the consent calendar items. Question by Commissioner Kulik.
Just have one question. Does there ever become a point where we would want to switch auditors even if they continue to be low bidder on this process?
The audit committee did talk about that as far as whether there's value in doing that or not. Typically, that decision is made before we send it out for proposals so that everybody knows that that's one of the primary criteria. But with this one, what the audit committee talked about is not only was it low bid, but the amount of partner time, which is higher level work, was drastically higher in this proposal. And so the audit committee felt that even though it was the same firm, the service that we're getting is at a much better level than some of the other proposals. So they didn't feel it was worth switching at this time.
So 5 years from now, they'll ask that same question. Okay.
Yeah.
If I had to bet, I would say that the audit firm did that because they know how well our financial department is and how they do such a great job with keeping track of things. You know, they always compliment us and say how easy it is to work through our audit, so. With that, she does a nice job, doesn't she? With that, seeing no other comments or questions, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. All right, item number 15 is considering approval of amended sanitary sewer house lead reconnection policy. So I'll ask the city manager to go over that for us.
Yes, this amended policy was presented back in August and was postponed to obtain additional information on property owner responsibilities. The city attorney has confirmed that the property owner is responsible for the leads in situations such as this. So what this proposed policy does is it outlines certain circumstances where the city will provide partial reimbursement to the property owner for the movement of that sewer lead. So we're recommending you approve the policy as presented, which provides greater clarity and consistency, outlines the expectations, the eligibility, and the reimbursement process for this program.
Commissioner Kulik.
So moved.
Okay, so you're moving to approve the amended policy.
As presented.
As presented, all right. Is there a second by Commissioner Gillis? Comments and questions? Commissioner Joseph.
I was wondering, do we know how many properties will be affected by this policy?
It varies each year because the rear yard piece only kicks in when we actually abandon a rear yard sewer, which doesn't happen every year. It happens occasionally, or if a property owner's sewer lead fails, which happens occasionally. The cross-connection one, again, we find out about those haphazardly. So I would say on average we have, I don't know if I know how many on average we have a year. Do you know, John?
It's a small number, one or two. There could be an occasion if a sewer that ran behind a whole string of houses that fails, they all got to go out to the streets. But usually it's because we can't service that line, it's on private property. We need to abandon that line. But it's a small number.
Commissioner Kulik.
The other thing that's happening, I know when they repaved Fancher Street several years ago, in anticipation of those old sewer lines failing, they left sewer lines out there so that when and if that day ever happens, they don't have to dig up the whole street. The sewer line is capped underneath, behind the curb there, so they can get to it and do that work in the future, which was smart and foresightful, if that's a word.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Commissioner Joseph.
My concern with the new policy is that if someone has a rear sewer line and the city decides to abandon that line, they're going to be hit with a bill to replace their lead. And when we look at what the possible cost of that new lead is, even if the city fulfills 85% of that cost, we're looking at almost $1,000 or $750, I think is what we got in the packet. And I just think that's a really high cost to the taxpayers and the property owners to cover for something that they can't really anticipate.
Commissioner Kulik.
And the flip side of that is the city can't anticipate when those sewer lines are going to fail either, so it's not like we can tell you in 5 years we're going to have to replace that line because we just know it's going bad. So
I already replaced mine.
yeah.
We're good for a couple years. Commissioner Lang.
I am sympathetic with the concern that Commissioner Joseph raised. That's the reason we postponed it, was because I was asking just exactly what does the law say in a situation where the the homeowner's lead is working and there isn't any problem, it hasn't been blocked, because there's a difference, you know, if there's a problem with that lead, then the city is reimbursing 50% because there was going to be an expense anyway. But if there's nothing wrong with the lead, but we're abandoning the back sewer because of the inability to get at that sewer, it may be that at that moment that homeowner isn't having they haven't done anything, they haven't had any problem with it. And we are asking them to take on an expense. So as I said in a note I sent so late today that I don't think anybody saw it, it's an unusual situation, and that's why I had also asked about the numbers. And to follow up on that information about the numbers that are involved, how likely is it, how often do you have a situation where a line has failed, and so it's being moved, as opposed to how likely is it that we're going to end up with a block where all of a sudden we just decide we're going to abandon that back sewer? I mean, are we anticipating that that's likely to happen?
Yes, there would be some anticipation. One of the advantages of getting an assistant director is that we're going to be able to proactively look at some of these, because there are sections where there might be a series of houses that attach to a sewer main that we cannot service. We can't clean it out, we can't repair it, because they're in they're in their backyards of these houses. And so maybe your lead didn't fail, but if that main failed, now we got to get out of that alley because we can't fix it. Mm-hmm. So I would anticipate there will be some of those as we clean up these easements. We try to get easements so that we can go and just leave it like it is, but if we can't get an easement, then we've got to get everybody to the front. So it's going to be a small number, mm-hmm. But I would anticipate there'll be some.
Okay. Well, with that and with this discussion, I am going to make a motion to amend, a slight amendment to this. I'd like to move that we amend the section of this change dealing with the 85%, those situations where it's 85% reimbursement, and make the reimbursement 90%. And if I get a second on that, I'll explain why I'm interested in the 90% reimbursement.
So I see a motion for an amendment. Is there a second by Commissioner Lalonde? Okay.
The reason, as I said in the note that I sent out later this afternoon, the reason I feel, and part of me feels like the city should just cover it, but I understand the way in which there's potentially some benefit to the property owner if, in fact, something has to happen with that line, and the city would not be able to get at it. But as I was thinking about the percentage, it struck me that this situation is somewhat similar to a situation where private property owners, for example, around an alley, they want an alley put in. So they've asked for it. And if it is accepted by the city, then they pay 90% and the city pays 10%. And the same thing used to be true on streets. Most of them are paved now, but it used to be that if you wanted to have your street paved, then because the homeowner was going to be the primary beneficiary, they initiated it, they'd pay 90%. And the city would be paid 10%. This seems to me a little bit, it's not entirely a reverse situation, but it is a situation where the city has initiated it. There isn't anything particularly happening on that property. Indirectly, that property owner may at some point benefit, may not, but, and so it just seemed to me, using that model, said that if we did it with the 90% from the city and the 10% from the property owner, it is consistent with the policy we use when it's the other way around. And that was the reason why I thought, rather than just not voting for it at all, that I'd be more comfortable with a motion that was 90-10.
Commissioner Kulik.
There is a benefit to the property owner that when you have, I mean, the sewer line running from my house to the alley failed 10 years ago, I don't remember. And the reason it failed is because it was an old clay tile sewer line. And the new one that they fern coat end on either end of it is a new plastic pipe. Plastic pipe, there ain't nothing gonna bother that for another 1,000 years. The clay pipes that are out there, you know, one sewer route and it's gone. And there is a tremendous benefit to the homeowner to know that you've got a new PVC sewer line all the way out to the main, and it's gonna drain just fine for a long, long, long time. And the city's gonna do all the work, correct? And determine what the cost is, and we're gonna send them a bill, and if they can't pay it, the city commission has the option of stringing that out over several years. So I'll be voting against the proposed motion.
Commissioner Gillis.
When these leads, when the new sewer lines were first put in, I don't remember correctly, but was it 50-50?
Typically, when we put in sewer lines, the city pays 100% of the cost for sewer mains.
Okay.
But not for each connection.
No.
But each connection to a house is the responsibility of the property owner, and the property owner pays the full cost of the connection to the house.
Okay. And is the way this written, is that still where they have to pay for the full connection from the house to the sewer line?
Well, the standard is that you have to pay for the full amount. This policy is an exception to that that says under these circumstances, the city would share in the cost. And in some circumstances, the city shares at 50%, and in other circumstances, the city shares at what was proposed at 85% and is now being suggested as 90%.
So when you put these in initially way back in the Stone Age, and the property owners that tied in had to pay up to the lead in from their property.
From the main to their property.
Right. Okay. And then people that opted out, which the former owner of our house opted out. So we had the old sewer lines that continuously went bad or had roots, you know, affecting the sewer. And so we had to tie in and go under the street and pay for it when we decided to do that about 20 years ago.
I don't know about that.
So, but that is usually the way it progressed. If you didn't tie in and you wanted to keep your sewer line the way it was, some people did.
Everybody ties in. You have to tie in the city. Somebody, if you built a home today, you would pay for the line that goes from your house out to the main. You own that part. So somebody, maybe in your house's history, maybe had an old line in there and they never fixed it, but they paid for it initially, and if it broke down, then the current owner, or in your case, you bought the house so that you're the current owner. If something goes wrong, you fix it because you own it from the house to the main. The city owns the mains. The lead is owned by the homeowner.
Yeah, but it went to an alley, or an abandoned alley. It wasn't to the line. And so when we continuously had problems, we had to actually pay for it to go from our house to the line, which actually was under the street because it was on the other side of the street.
So this sounds like, I don't know, but it sounds like a rear lot connection where for some reason this line behind the houses is abandoned. And so
No, the line wasn't abandoned. There's just one in front, so when her lead failed,
when her
she
lead
had to
failed,
hook
you
to the
connected to the
front.
front, because no sense connecting to the one in back, which we might be caught in the dilemma later on, so you go to one that there's not going to be any problems with.
I'm just considering the people that have had to pay that in the past, and because they didn't decide to tie in when it was done, you know, however many years ago, because they held off, now the city is paying their portion that they didn't do several years ago when they could have.
I don't know if people have had the opportunity. Sorry, I didn't mean to jump in. I just don't, what I'm hearing you say is that like it was a choice that people made. My understanding is it's not really a choice that you necessarily made. It's when you built your house, we were tying into the back alley, and then when we repaved your street, we put in a front sewer line, and in the time between when you connected to the back one and the time it failed, a new front line had been put in. So I don't think that when the front line was put in, we came and knocked on the door and said, do you want to tie in with a brand new line right now? Because, you know, I don't know if it was a a conscientious choice. That was where you could tie in at that opportunity when that house was built or when that last line was put in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, like a neighbor of ours on Broadway, he was also tied into this line that was in this abandoned alley, that no longer is an alley. He was on the same line, he was from, hundreds of years ago, not really, but about 50, okay? So when they redid Broadway, because they were tearing it up, he was able to get a lead from his house to the new sewer line on Broadway and, undid his one that was behind his house in the alley. And I think that was 100% paid because they were doing the street, but I'm not sure. He may have had to pay half. I'm just saying,
The policy we've had in place since 2006, he would have paid half in that case. I don't know what year this actually happened, but this policy's been in place since 2006 where the city paid for half of it.
okay, it was like 2 years ago when you guys all did Broadway, all the way,
Yep, so it would have been 50%.
okay. See, I'm just having a hard time deciding, some people had to pay it, and then some people don't, and then, now we're trying to cover it at a higher percent from taxpayer money, which will obviously serve them better than being tied to an old sewer line that goes to their back. But we're kind of, saying, well, we'll cough up the money now, where other people maybe in the neighborhood had that expenditure out of pocket, so. Thanks for helping me understand that.
Yeah. Okay, so we have a motion to amend the policy for not when your sewer line fails, but the part about when we are coming to you and saying, we need you to move your lead, your tie-in. So, are there any other questions or comments on that amendment? Seeing none, I'm gonna ask for a show of hands as well as a verbal vote on this. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Okay, so that passes. So we are on to the actual motion, right? Now that we amended it, we still have a motion as amended. So any other comments or questions? All right, seeing none, all those in favor of approving the amended policy as we just amended right now, say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
All right, that passes 5-2. Okay, on to number 18, consider a lease renewal with the Experimental Aircraft Association.
1 year ago, we entered into a lease agreement with EAA for the use of a hangar at the airport, and the group agreed to fix up the hangar and focus their efforts on attracting visitors to our airport. That 1 year lease is now up, and we've found that it has worked very well, and the EAA has done a great job not only of working on the hangar, but continuing to attract a lot of traffic to the airport. So we're recommending a renewal of the lease for 1 year and authorizing the city manager to sign that lease. Typically, I sign the airport leases if they meet our standard parameters, but because this one is different where it's an exchange of services instead of paying actual cash for the rent, we're asking you to approve that, but also suggesting that if the parameters don't change in the future, that you authorize the city manager to continue to be able to sign those renewals. So it's kind of a two-part motion to sign this one and future renewals if the terms don't change.
I see a motion from Commissioner Kulik, seconded by Vice Mayor Mattei. Any comments or questions on this item? Commissioner Gillis.
Thank you. Just a couple questions first. Mr. Zhang, what would be the regular lease amount on the hangar that we're allowing them to have for free, like on a monthly basis approximately?
$300 or $400.
A month?
Yes. Yes.
Is this a corporate hangar?
No, it used to be occupied by a person who ran airplane repair out at our place, at the airport.
We only have one corporate hangar that houses jets.
Okay. Okay, my reservations is allowing the city manager to continue the lease without the city commission taking a look at that. So I'd like to make an amendment to the motion that we sign this one-year agreement, but without the authorization for the city manager to do that continuously to the future.
Second.
Okay, I see a second from Commissioner Joseph. Could I, I'm just going to propose a slight change in that because I know the time-consuming task of bringing it to the commission every year, if it's a yearly renewal, say that it needs to come back to the commission every 5 years or something, because I understand what you're, I think what you're getting at is if all of our hangars are full and you know, the community changes and we have a really booming airport, are we going to be giving up something that we could be getting an income on? And so I see what you're getting at, and I'm just wondering if maybe having it come back to the commission every 5 years to look at it to make sure that it's still an appropriate agreement to be in would be an idea that you would entertain, or if you would.
Well,
yeah, if I could, Commissioner Gillis.
okay, the whole commission, we know what we're looking at fees through the budget, and we're raising rental licenses, we're raising building permit fees, we're making the business community and our own community, be it sports fees, we're making it so that we don't subsidize that with taxpayer dollars. Mm-hmm. We're making it 100%, they pay the cost of all these things services that we give them. Yet, and I have nothing against the Experimental Aircraft Association. My son was able to fly with our previous airport manager. I see the value of this, so I don't want anybody to construe that I have anything against the airport or anything that they provide, but we are subsidizing this with taxpayer dollars at approximately about $4,000 a year, or, go ahead, John.
If there's not a candidate waiting for this, in fact, this building was in need of repair, which they're doing, and some upkeep, and so they're doing that. And if somebody were to have interest, that's a whole other story. But since it's not, this vacant building would not, it's not that we'll lose money because of it.
Well, my reservation is that we're doing something for one group that I feel that we have value, that has value, but there are other entities and other groups that also provide value, and it's a hard sell for me to say, we're going to give you this hangar for free, we're not going to charge you a monthly fee, we're going to then allow the city manager to continue leasing that without just there could be new city commissioners 5 years from now, or even before 5 years from now. There might be different city commissioners that want to take a look at this, and our priorities could change. Mm-hmm. Maybe 2 years from now, we would look at this group and say, hey, could you afford $1,000 a year to you know, being that you're getting the hangar for free that was built on taxpayer dollars. So my reservations is that we're asking everybody else to pay for this, that, and everything else that we provide as services. And even though I do value this group, I'm a little bit hesitant of allowing the lease to be continued without the city commission looking at it.
Commissioner Kulik.
I'd like to propose an amendment, which I believe I can do at this point in time. That amendment would be that the city manager continues to have the authority to renew those leases in the future, but she shall prepare a report annually that would include an estimate of the dollar value of the promotions done by the experimental aircraft. So if they say, we brought 300 airplanes in for pancake breakfast or whatever it is, and we estimate from that we sold, you know, so many dollars worth of fuel, and I'm sure the Michigan Aviation Association has some sort of, I mean, they talk, well, some sort of thing that every flight into your community generates X number of dollars spin-off money. So you know, I have no problem with the city manager extending this. I'd just like to see on an annual basis some report from the experimental aircraft. You know, we did these events, which brought this many planes in the community. We sold this much fuel, and Michigan Aviation Authority estimates that that many planes generates this much spin-off money in your community.
Okay, so we have a motion we have a proposed amended motion, and now we have an amendment
To the amendment.
to the amendment.
Can I have a point
Need a
of
second.
Can I have a point of clarification?
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Kulik, is your amendment just to include a report every year, but it allows the city manager to continually? Okay.
Because we, the city commission, will get a report every year, and if next year and the year after we say, well, they only brought 2 airplanes into the city, and that generated $1.65, we want to revisit this policy at that point in time. So staff generally brings us good ideas, and this is a good idea, and it doesn't say that this has to go on in perpetuity. If we see that they're not making improvements to the hangar and or bringing revenue into the city, we can say, nah, we don't want to renew it again.
I'll second Commissioner Kulik's motion.
Because I'm struggling with,
Well, I don't
your
know if we
motion
can
wasn't
even do
quite
it.
an amendment to the amendment. It was almost like a different amendment. So
Call
that
it
would
what
be.
you want. You're the parliamentarian, fix it.
How would you like us to proceed?
Looks like you had some more.
Well, I was going to just make a parliamentary inquiry about whether or not it might be better to call this a substitute amendment. And my understanding of that is that they're kind of 2 different ideas, and if that one passes, it
Cancels out
replaces the
first
previous one, and if it doesn't pass, then you go back to the previous one. So I just wondered, because I had the same question about whether or not it was exactly an amendment to the amendment or a different amendment.
Yeah, that's what I was struggling with, was that it didn't seem to change the amendment. Your second one didn't. So I would say it would need to be some kind of substitution or vote on the first amendment and then try another amendment, because it really doesn't feel like you're amending the amendment. It's completely different. It's not changing a word or the years or something like that.
So we should vote on Commissioner Gillis's amendment first,
Unless you want to do the substitute amendment.
unless we want to do it as a substitute amendment. Any comments from the commissioners on which direction we wanted to take with that? Commissioner Joseph?
Why don't we vote on Commissioner Gillis's amendment first, and then consider Commissioner Kulik's amendment?
As a secondary. Okay.
If it doesn't.
Anybody have any, Commissioner Lang?
I don't want to confuse things. I just think that it might be preferable to withdraw the second amendment until after we have voted on the first amendment, and then reintroduce and there might even be a question with that, but I just think it would simplify things
make
if
it
we did
cleaner,
it that way.
Right. So,
If now that's up to the person who made the
Right.
amendment,
That's fine. I don't
obviously,
care.
yeah.
so Commissioner Kulik is withdrawing his amendment.
You have to
And-
have a second withdrawn also.
Commissioner Joseph is also withdrawing his support of that second amendment. Yes, okay. All right, so back to the first amendment. I believe Commissioner Lalonde has a comment or a question.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, so the EAA isn't necessarily, they're getting the hangar for free, but it's actually, they're getting it in exchange for doing work on the hangar?
Correct.
So they're not necessarily getting it, they're getting it in exchange for,
They're not paying a
Services
monthly
rendered.
rental fee, but they're maintaining the hangar
right,
instead
and they're
with their
maintaining the
funds.
hangar for free, for us. Right. Okay.
Kind of like how Little League takes care of the fields somewhat, and they pay for a lot of the improvements there, and we don't charge them the same as we do other
Kind of like that.
groups, right? That's a kind of, in my brain,
Charge Little
it
League.
feels.
Yeah.
I know, but we didn't charge them as much, if I
We didn't
remember.
have a raise. We didn't increase the fee,
Yeah.
I think it was.
I think actually we waived their fee for using the fields for Little League activities.
Yeah.
They still pay for some of the maintenance at the field, and they pay for some of the things at the field, but they don't pay a rental fee
Yeah.
for the field.
I want to say I remember doing it. So, Okay, one more comment, Commissioner
So-
Gillis.
Just as we had it on our agenda this evening, of course, in the future, hopefully wouldn't take this much discussion to get through one item. But I think there is some value of us as city commissioners seeing that and keeping it on our radar, that this is something that we're providing the EAA, rather than doing it every 5 years or just a report. I would hate for a report or a lease been already signed and then it comes to us after the fact, or, so that's my last comment.
Okay. Any other comments or questions on Commissioner Gillis's amendment? Seeing none, I'm also going to ask for a show of hands because I don't know which way this is going to go. All those in favor of amending the motion to require it to come back to the City Commission every year, say aye.
Aye.
And all those opposed, nay.
Nay.
All right, so I believe that was a 4-3 vote, so Commissioner Gillis's proposal dies. Commissioner Kulik.
I'd like to reintroduce my proposed amendment that the city manager retain the ability to execute future leases, but that an annual report be prepared and presented to the commission at that time, estimating the dollar amount that the EAA has done for maintenance on the hangar and the value of promotions that they've done.
Second.
Okay, I see a second from Commissioner Joseph. Any other comments or questions on this item? Commissioner Gillis.
So the report would be done before the lease is signed?
I believe that's what I'm hearing. Anyone else hear that or no?
The report, we would be
Kulik.
getting the report before the lease is signed,
That would make sense.
or, you know.
Yeah, so that it's
Not
not
really
a,
lease.
we're not getting the information and then saying, oh, sorry, we already are obligated to another year. So before the renewal, we would get a report. The
Quite
commissioners.
frankly, if I'm bringing you a report every year before I can sign the lease, I might as well bring the lease to you to sign as well. There's really no advantage to streamlining the process if we have to have that step in it. We might as well bring the report and the lease at the same time and let you authorize it.
Then you don't have any say. And I just want to mention, it was on the consent calendar, so this wouldn't even have taken any time if it would have stayed on the consent calendar. I just had some questions about giving a hangar for free every year on forever. So that's why I took it off the consent calendar. It very well could have stayed on the consent calendar, just having our eyes on it to make sure that's what we continued wanted to do. So that's why.
Okay. All right, so we are at, the recommended motion is that the city manager would approve it. This amendment asks for a report. Comments from city manager as she might as well just bring the lease if she's going to do a report for us. We are now going to vote unless there are further questions on this. Seeing none. Okay, again, show of hands, if you will. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Nay.
Nay. All right, so we have a,
Because of what Nancy said. So
so
was that a 4-3, so now?
that was a 4-3, so now it passes. And so that was the amendment to the motions. Do we still have to vote on the motion as a whole now?
Who voted against that one more time?
Commissioner Lalonde, Ling, and Lentz.
I voted
Oh,
for it.
you voted for it.
I think you voted.
I voted against it.
Okay, so, sorry, Gillis, Ling, and Lentz. I wanted all the L's. Okay. I don't know where we're at with this item, to be honest with you. Okay, so we need to now vote on the motion as a whole, which is to have the city manager bring us a report with information about what the group has done before we sign the lease agreement.
I guess the other thing I would indicate is you're also voting to allow me to sign the lease this year, because that was the original part, so I can sign it this year, and then in future years I can sign it, but only after I've brought you a report first, is your amended motion.
That's what I'm hearing. Okay. Commissioner Joseph, did you have a?
I'd like to motion to reconsider the amendment.
I'm sorry, what did you just say?
I want to reconsider the amendment we just passed.
Okay, is there a second?
Oh, no, he can't because he
can we?
wasn't on the prevailing side.
Yeah, it was.
He was on the prevailing
Oh,
side.
Yeah,
wasn't
he
it?
was.
Okay, you're right.
This is so much fun tonight.
I didn't mean to make this so bad.
Way to go.
Educational opportunity for Robert's Rules of Order.
Right.
Okay, so Commissioner Joseph would like to reconsider the amended motion.
Do you need a second?
I just wanted to confirm him, and I think I saw a second from Commissioner Ling.
And as a parliamentary point, I don't think the seconder has to have been on the prevailing side, although I could be wrong about that, but I don't think so.
Okay. Commissioner Joseph, go.
The more I think about this, and obviously this is very, it's not something we read all week and could prepare for, but the more I think about it, and I really do think that there's value in getting that report because it shows how much that they contribute to our community and how much work they're doing at the airport. But I also look at this, that the entire goal of this was for city staff to be less bogged down. And now we're saying you need to have a report, and I'm wondering how much time is that going to take up city staff time to bring a report and report all those things to us instead of just bringing, hey, here's the lease, sign it or don't. And so I can't support the amendment anymore.
Commissioner Kulik.
I see most of the burden being placed back on the EAA and telling them, the city commission said that in the future we need a report that tells us what promotions you've done and the estimated value of those. And when Mr. Brickner did his report on the airport, he had a number that said our airport generates, I don't know how many millions of dollars a year in spin-off business from the flights in and flights out. I would assume you'd use that same multiplier in there to say we brought in 500 planes this year, we estimate it's that much value. I don't see it as being a real overly burdensome thing for the EAA people to do. And, you know, here's the receipts. You know, we spent $1,000 last year on paint and disinfectant and whatever on the hangar. Pretty simple, guys. I don't see it as a big burden.
I agree with Commissioner Kulik. A lot of the information can be obtained from the EAA. As far as the multiplier, I'm not sure that's quite as simple because that was done by a consultant for MDOT, and it wasn't just an actual factor that was applied. They did a significant amount of analysis for that, but all of the other stuff we can certainly provide with the help of EAA as far as the type of visitors they brought in, the number of planes, the number of gallons sold. That stuff we can do. I don't know that we can apply a factor, but we can certainly get you an annual report.
Commissioner Gillis.
Those statistics are usually they're not hardline statistics. When they're saying we had 10 planes come in and they generated $100,000 worth of extra activity, that is somebody that's sitting and assuming that they're coming into Mount Pleasant. They might be going out to the casino and never step foot in the city of Mount Pleasant proper. And so I think we need to take that into consideration on some of those values of how much extra money is coming in. And I'm assuming, being they've had the hangar for free for a whole year, that they've done maintenance, and that maintenance isn't going to be continuing year after year with the amount of money that they've invested this year. I mean, there's only so much maintenance you can do on a hangar. And so let's say if they invested $1,000 this year, because we didn't get that in our packet, how much money they've invested in that city-owned hangar. And so I don't assume that in future years that is going to be the same amount that they've done this year on preparing the hangar to be whatever usable they define as usable. So just wanted to throw out there that this year they might not be investing any money into that hangar, and we're giving it to them for free for a whole year and subsequent years.
Commissioner Joseph.
I have a question for Nancy. is it gonna be, would it be is it more burdensome to put this report together or to just bring a contract for us every year?
Like this, like what we have here.
Certainly, bringing the contract to you is easier than putting together another report, but what I'm hearing is even if we brought you the contract, you would want some justification about why we are recommending something different than the typical lease terms. And really, our primary reason this year was because, as Mr. Zhang indicated, there's no demand for that hangar. They've put a lot of time and effort into it, and really it's the visitors they've brought to the airport that are the high value that we've seen. If we didn't think it was bringing value to the airport, we wouldn't have brought the recommendation to you. So I think what I've learned from this is when we bring it next year, we should give you more details about why we're recommending the parameters be different.
Thank you.
Or we could go back to the proposed motion that just lets the city manager make that determination until she feels like we probably aren't going to do, but we would not want to continue the promotion. Just to throw it back on the table, to remind everyone where we started. Okay, so we have now a reconsideration of the motion that required the city manager to bring us a report every year.
Actually, you need to vote on the motion to reconsider. If that passes, then you would go back to that amendment and vote on the amendment again. That's how reconsider
So you
works.
just have to say, will we reconsider it first?
I just want you to know that after this vote, we're going to take a 5-minute break. Okay.
And this was on the consent calendar, remind you.
I remember who took it off of there. Okay, so we need a motion on reconsidering.
No, we have the motion.
No, we need to vote on the motion to reconsider. Okay.
State the motion, would you?
All those in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Okay, so 3 to 4. So now we are voting 4 to 3, yes. So now we are reconsidering the original amendment, which was, what was the second amendment? But the amendment that passed, which was to have the city manager bring a report, right, every year. Okay.
And
Comments
the
or questions?
ability to sign the lease without us saying yes. Is that correct?
No.
Yes.
Yes. Bring a report, sign, yes.
So we will not vote on the lease. The city manager will bring us a report after the lease is already signed.
No, the report will come before. It's fun, right? All right. All those in favor of having the city manager bring us a report with the lease, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Nay. Commissioner Ling, did you vote on that?
Voting on at this point. I'm not sure that restating of it was, well,
Did you? I think I just saw a 3-3 vote.
Kathy, jump in there.
Which
Yes,
is a 4-3
no.
vote.
Which is a 4-3 vote. Okay. I just wanted to.
Speak, it's a yes.
I just wanted to know
it
if
is true.
if I missed something though.
He's correct.
Okay.
So
All
the
right.
motion passes.
The motion
Again,
Yes.
passes again. Okay.
but with different people.
With different people.
Because I had voting no on that. Lentz, Mad-Eye, and
Gillis.
Gillis.
Gillis?
No, I didn't vote no on that.
Joseph?
I did, yeah.
Okay, Lentz, Mad-Eye, and Joseph, all right.
Okay. So now we are going to vote on letting the city manager sign this year's lease and ask her to bring a report before we sign future leases. Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 1. All right.
We did it, guys.
6 to 1. All right. I am going to ask that we take 5 minutes to just regroup. So give us just a moment, please.
All right, so
camera. We are back in session. We took a short recess after item number 18, and we are on to item number 20, which is reconsidering a contract regarding some some development. So I'll ask the city manager to go through that item.
Okay, in 2013, the city entered into a contract with Joe Olivieri for the purchase of 9 lots in East Point 4, which is along Batson Street. And the contract required Mr. Olivieri to build a certain number of homes each year of the contract. And he has complied with his obligations under the contract and is ahead of schedule because in some years he built more than the minimum requirement that the contract had. As you know, Mr. Olivieri expressed some concerns about the applicability of the residential zoning requirements to this neighborhood, and that matter has been sent to the Planning Commission to consider when they look at the zoning ordinance. So Mr. Olivieri has asked for an extension to his contract until June of next year to build the house he's required to build in 2018. The Property Committee met with Mr. Olivieri, and as a result of that discussion, what the Property Committee is recommending to you this evening is that we do an amendment to the contract that waives the requirement to build a house in 2018. If this contract amendment is approved, the contract would require Mr. Olivieri to build a house in 2019 and then to build the last house in 2020. So we're recommending you authorize the mayor and clerk to sign an amendment as drafted by the city attorney that just waives the requirement to build a house this year since he's ahead of schedule.
Commissioner Kulik.
So moved.
And seconded by Vice Mayor Mattei. Commissioner Kulik.
The Property Committee met and discussed this issue and is recommending it to the full commission.
Okay, thank you. I believe Vice Mayor Mattei has a comment.
Okay.
I can tell by nonverbal cues.
With what the contract had required originally was at least 1 a year, and so it was sort of an inescapable, point of view to take into account the fact that he was, like ahead of that bare minimum. I mean, there was no actual like schedule, corresponding of an amount, like, with specific years. The specific term was at least 1 a year, and so, trying to, see those two together, came up with, this recommendation as presented, where, giving him the benefit of the, position that he's in with the fact that he is ahead, if you will, with with building the homes. So with that, I think that this recommendation, in light of the discussion with Mr. Olivieri, was a sound, compromise, based on, moving from where we originally were at with the request compared to the interest of where the city was with what the minimum obligations are or were with the 2013 contract. So the city itself is like at the minimum end is no worse off. So I'll be in agreement with this.
Okay. Commissioner Joseph.
I believe that Mr. Olivieri has all the intent to build, and I think from his communication a few weeks ago when we referred all of that to the Planning Commission, his concerns was about cost because of how our roof requirements and the pitch increased his building costs. Am I correct in that?
That was one of his concerns. He was concerned about the roof pitch. He was concerned about the placement of the garage. And I think those were the two and he was worried about how it would fit into those surrounding homes because the requirements are different than what those other homes look like.
So notwithstanding knowing Joe Olivieri and his commitment to the community, I guess I just, if this was somebody who we didn't have any history with, my question is, could he have recourse at the ZBA and say, hey, I've got these, I've got this building plan, and can I just go to the ZBA and ask for an exception? Or if he didn't do that and he came back next year and said, the cost is really too high for me to make a profit, and he decided to not build. And what happens to that contract and the deeds of those parcels?
Let me address your first question about going to the ZBA. Certainly, any property owner can apply to the ZBA, but there's a number of criteria they have to meet to be able to get a variance. And I'm not sure if he would be able to meet all of those criteria to be eligible for a variance. That would be for the ZBA to determine. But based on what I know about it, I'm not sure that that would be successful. As far as the second question, if he doesn't build next year, he would be in default of the contract. And what the contract allows for is for the city to buy back the 2 remaining lots from him at his original purchase price. And that's what will happen this year if we don't approve the amendment and he doesn't build as well. So the default requirements are basically we buy back the 2 lots at the purchase price, which was $6,000 for each lot.
I guess I have a third question. So, Mr. Oliveri is probably hoping that he gets some change to the zoning ordinance, or he gets, something that allows him to build very consistently with how the other homes have been built. And my question is are we in jeopardy if he doesn't get the changes that he wishes, and because of our zoning ordinance change, does that put us in a legal gray area? Because when he signed the contract, it makes him, he has to build to the zoning ordinance, as you see in the contract. But because the zoning ordinance has changed, does that give him a way to say, hey, this, the city changed, and now, now I have to redo all my plans?
According to the city attorney, no.
Okay.
All right. Other questions, Commissioner Ling?
I'm going to vote in favor of this, and I guess I want to make it clear that the vote has nothing really to do with the reasons for it, other than we had a contract, and it's still possible for that. We can have this 1-year delay because Mr. Olivieri is ahead, so even with this, we'll end up where we had intended to be. And I think that, and that's the reason I'm voting yes, without it reflecting in any way on any of the issues that are involved in. I think it's simply to say, you're ahead, you'd like a year not to do it, that's fine, because we still end up where we need to be at the end of the contract.
Commissioner Gillis.
And it's not a year, it's just till the end of this year, from October to December. And then next year in 2019, if nothing's changed or the Planning Commission hasn't addressed any of the concerns with the new zoning ordinance, he will still be required to build next year in 2019, 1 home, and then in 2020.
1 home, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, because all we're doing is waiving any requirement for this year, is the recommendation.
For the 2018 calendar year? Yeah. Okay. Seeing no other comments or questions on that, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Item number 21, we had a generous offer to do some fireworks at my favorite parade of the year.
Yes, we are very lucky in Mount Pleasant to have members of our community who believe in our city and want to give back to our city and provide opportunities for our residents to meet together. We talked about that at the beginning of the meeting, and you saw a number of examples of that in the video from MAC TV. And this item is another example of that. 2018 marks the 85th anniversary of the Bird Bar and Grill, and it also happens to mark the 25th anniversary of the Mount Pleasant Christmas celebration. So therefore, the Bridenstine family has offered to donate funds to the city so that a firework display can be held at the end of the Christmas parade on Saturday, December 1st. In order to accept this donation, there's really 2 actions needed by the City Commission. The first is you need to take action to authorize a fire display because it's on a date outside of what is allowed by state law and by our ordinance, because that says fireworks can only occur on holidays and the day before and day after a holiday. So we would ask for your authorization to hold this display on December 1st. And secondly, we're recommending a sole source contract with Wolverine Fireworks to put on the display for our community that night. So we recommend you approve both of those, subject to the donation received.
I see a motion from Commissioner Joseph, I think was first, seconded by Commissioner Gillis. Comments or questions?
Looking forward to the fireworks.
I think it'll be a great time.
And
Commissioner
thank you to the
Gillis.
Bridenstine family, and really excited that the Bird is celebrating an anniversary, a milestone like that.
My favorite watering hole. Okay. Not that I go there very often, but, you know, if I get to pick. I think this is a fantastic example, again, of community involvement, and I think Lois and her family are amazing and do some wonderful things for our community, and this is another example of that. So, with that, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, I'm glad we all agree on fireworks at least. Okay, a request for a refund for the principal shopping district exemption thing.
Our formula for assessments for the principal shopping district special assessment, as you well know, is a little bit complex because it looks at per square footage, allocates based on that, but gives credit for parking spaces that are provided by a property owner. So all of those calculations are done on a spreadsheet because our assessing program can't take into consideration all of those factors. The state law for special assessments for the principal shopping district requires currently that governmental parcels and residential parcels be exempt from the special assessment for the principal shopping district. So while we were calculating the assessment roll for 2018, 6 parcels were identified as being residential parcels that should no longer be part of the assessment roll, and they were therefore coded as exempt as we worked on the current year and next year's roll. But one of those property owners contacted city staff to indicate that they had paid those property or those special assessments in prior years, even though their property was a residential property, and therefore they requested a refund of those prior year assessments. According to the state law, the appeal for any assessment has to be filed within 30 days of when the roll is approved. So with those prior rolls, as you can imagine, the appeal period had long since passed, and city staff has no authority to change that on their own. So we began speaking with the city attorney about what options were available due to that manual error. And the city attorney has indicated that the city commission has the option to consider the request for the refund. There's no obligation to do it legally, but you have the authority to be able to make that decision to issue a refund. But if that is done, we cannot respread that money to the other property owners. It's too late to do that. So it would just be a refund to those property owners. So we're recommending that if you're inclined to issue that refund from the property owner who requested it, that you should also consider the other 5 properties that fall into that same category that were identified. And since this is outside of what you're required to do, there is no guidance on how long you should look back for that refund. And so the best guidance that we can give you would be to use maybe the standard statute of limitations for a contract dispute, which would be 6 years. So therefore, we've calculated for you what that 6-year refund would be if you desire to do that for those 6 property owners.
I see a motion, I see a lot of motions from Commissioner Ling.
Yes, I'd like to move that we go with the first option that we had in the report, which was to refund the entire amount overpaid, and that we pay for that out of the principal shopping district assigned balance as recommended.
I have a question.
Commissioner Kulik?
We need a second, probably.
Why My question is that to refund all 6 properties or just the one?
I think that's all.
So it's a clarification on the motion.
I was taking the option that was listed, refund the entire amount overpaid, and I thought, and I assumed that that meant all of the properties.
If it, I would support it if it's all the properties.
Right, that's was my assumption about
So
what that
all
was
of the
recommending.
properties
All
for
the
the
properties,
whole
the
time
entire amount.
period.
Right, for the entire, right.
All 6, okay.
All 6 of them for the entire.
So I have a motion to refund all 6, the entire amount. I see a second from Commissioner Joseph. Comments or questions?
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
So you're saying from because the motion in the packet, it says 2012 to 2017. Are you saying 2012 or 2008?
I'm saying 2008.
2008, okay.
Yeah,
Because it's different than what's in the recommended in the packet said 12.
Right, this
so I just
is
wanted to
different
make
than
sure.
what was recommended in the
So eight,
packet. It
okay.
was one of the 3 options in the report that we had, that they acted on.
Okay. Commissioner Joseph?
I guess if I had any comment, it's just that, you know, it's unfortunate that, that we assessed this tax on properties that weren't actually in the PSD, and I think it just shows the integrity of our city to give back what is owed, although we're not legally bound. Obviously, we collected taxes that we really weren't supposed to have, so I think it's just the right thing to do.
Okay. Other comments or questions? So I did, just so everyone knows, I asked the city manager when we talked about this on Wednesday at our agenda meeting that in the future, when we look at the way that we do special assessments or this principal shopping district assessment, to see if there are ways that the computer system can calculate it, to see if we need to adjust the way we do our formula. I know it would be a big change, and I don't know what that would look like, but to see if there's a way that we can do it so that the computer system does it, so we don't have that option for manual error in the future. And so I don't even know if that's possible or what that would look like, but just as a notice to everyone, I did request that we, preemptively look to see what our options are and what that would look like for calculating that role. So with that.
Question.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Looking at the totals, that would be a refund of $8,758.80 if we go back to 2008.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so then why in the page above it, it says something, the fund balances, the special assessment has 19,000 in it. Got it, okay. So we'll be taking 8,000 from that 8,007 and refunding it back to 2008.
Mm-hmm. And hoping that we don't get a lot of snow. Because that's what that fund balance is used for, is extra snow. Okay, with that, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that passes. On to announcements of city-related issues or new business. Commissioner Kulik.
Just like to remind folks that Halloween's coming up, and it's helpful for the trick-or-treaters if you leave your porch lights on, if you're giving out candy and they don't trip coming up and down your stairs. And that's from 6 until 8, Nancy, right?
Correct.
On Halloween night. And we're getting ready for leaf pickup, and John, you can tell them the dates again. And
Right this week, and right to the curb this week, and picked up next week.
And give the guys help if you can. Don't park on the streets when they're out there trying to get the leaves, because they'll all end up under your car.
This is leaves, not brush and
Right.
trees.
Okay, Commissioner Joseph.
I just wanted to announce next week, a week from today, we're having a special meeting at CMU. It's in the UC building. We're going to be there with the Student Government Association, and it starts at 7 o'clock, just like usual.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Commissioner Gillis, I think, was faster.
It's fine.
Just want to remind everybody, November 6th is the big voting day. You can get information on the candidates at vote411.org. It's provided by the League of Women Voters. There's also brochures available at our local Veterans Memorial Library. If you don't have access to a computer or you like handheld papers that describe some of the candidates. And you can also, through MAC TV, from Carrie that was here earlier, look at some of the debates that the candidates participated in. So.
Thank you. Commissioner Ling.
Just two quick things. One, I wanted to mention for the commission and also the public that the International Relations Council, which is the group that keeps track of our sister city relationship with Okaya, Japan, and that's primarily a student exchange that goes on with students from Mount Pleasant going over, usually 6 to 8 students, going over for 2 weeks one summer, and then 6 to 8 students from Okaya coming to the Mount Pleasant on the opposite years. And it's been going on, at this point we're celebrating our 54th year, and they have an annual, it used to be annual, now it's just every other year, a banquet. It is their only fundraiser, and that banquet will be on November 8th out at Mid-Michigan Community College, Mid-Michigan College now, from 6 to 8, and if you're interested in supporting that event, they'll have a silent auction and reports on the students who went to Okaya last summer. You can go to the International Relations Council website or see me. I have information on it. And the second thing is just a reminder that a week from today will be the deadline for filling out applications for the various boards and commissions that we'll be filling for next year. So if you're interested in being on one of those boards or commissions, please try to get your application in by next week.
Thank you. And a thank you to our community for upholding our community standards this last weekend. We had a big football game in town, and we didn't have a lot of issues, and that's thanks to the cooperation and great teamwork that we have in this community for our community standards. Yes, sir.
I'd like to do a shout out for Mother Nature's help over the weekend also.
We see what we can do here at City Hall. All right. Seeing no other comments, I will open up the last opportunity for public comment. So this opportunity for public comment is anything city related. We ask that you leave your comments to 5 minutes and state your name and address. Seeing nobody rushing forward for public comment, I will close this portion of the meeting and ask that we recess. I'm not sure where we're recessing to, but we're going to recess to go into a work session.
We're going to stay down here. We're having problems with the boiler, and it's 78 degrees upstairs. So I think we will take a few minutes and set up the tables in a square down here and move the microphones and have our work session.
Here at the dais, don't bother with the table.
Well, let's give us just a couple minutes and we'll figure out what we're going to do. So. And not try to get through everything tonight.
Of course, it wouldn't be on.
I just don't know when you're going to get all the others. I don't know.